It didn't break when I bumped the counter, or when I dropped the dishcloth next to it, or when I brushed past it while unloading the dishwasher. It broke when I touched it. I hadn't planned to pick it up, my favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim I never minded. I reached for it without thinking, the way your body moves before your mind catches up. And when my fingers curled around the handle, it cracked in half. Quietly. No drama, no sound. Just the sharp feel of ceramic slipping from my hand and clinking against the sink. That's how it started. Not with a fight, not with a confession, but with a broken mug and a smell I couldn't place. My name's Iris Callahan. I'm 39 years old, and 3 days ago, my husband left a scarf in our laundry. Not mine, not his. I knew it wasn't mine because of the scent eucalyptus. I've never worn that smell. Can't stand it, actually. Gives me headaches. This scarf had been tucked between my sweaters, folded as if it belonged. I pulled it out with 2 fingers, already knowing something was wrong. I held it up to my face, and that scent hit me. Clean, expensive. Too fresh to be old, and that's when the name floated into my mind. Dana. Dana, my supervisor. The woman I hired 5 years ago? The woman who just last week told me she'd like to restructure the department. The woman whose perfume always arrived in the room before she did. Eucalyptus. I didn't say anything that morning. I made coffee like usual. Toasted 2 slices of bread, no butter. He came downstairs, Alan, looking like nothing had changed. Hair-damp shirt tucked in halfway, still buttoning his cuffs. He kissed my cheek and asked if I'd seen his navy tie. I stared at the coffee mug in my hand. Top drawer, I said. He smiled like he always did when he knew I'd saved him from his own mess. That was Monday. By Wednesday, I was fired. I didn't get a meeting. I didn't get an explanation. At 9:14 a.m., my login credentials stopped working. My files vanished. My access revoked. I called IT thinking maybe it was a mistake, systems glitch. But 10 minutes later, a man I barely knew showed up at my cubicle. "Iris," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I need you to come with me." I knew that line. I'd used it before. They walked me past Dana's office. She didn't look up, just tapped away at her keyboard like she couldn't hear the echo of my footsteps. Outside, it was raining. My umbrella was in Alan's car. I stood under the awning for a while, then walked to the lot, slowly letting the water soak through my coat. I got in my car and sat still for a long time. The scarf was still there on the passenger seat, right where I'd left it. I stared at it while the rain slid down the windshield. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched the storm. By evening, Alan still hadn't called. Not to check on me. Not to ask about dinner. Not to ask why I hadn't texted back. I knew why. I went home. I didn't take off my coat. Just walked into the kitchen and reached for the mug. I wasn't thinking. It was just habit, some last thread of normalcy. And when it cracked in my hand, it felt like the final answer to a question I hadn't let myself ask. This was real. This wasn't a mistake. He wasn't just cheating. They were getting rid of me. At some point, I must have cleaned up the shards. I don't remember doing it. But the sink was empty the next morning, and the scarf was gone from the seat. Alan was humming in the kitchen, pouring cereal like it was any other Thursday. I watched him from the hallway, his back turned, his shoulders relaxed. "You're up early?" he said, not looking. "I couldn't sleep," I answered. He turned, smiled, and leaned against the counter. "I was thinking we should take a weekend trip soon. You've been stressed." I nodded. "Yeah, that might be nice." His smile widened like I'd passed some test, like I was still playing along. Later, he left for work early. Claimed he had a breakfast meeting downtown. I waited until he was gone, then opened the drawer in his study. Insurance files, tax documents, spare passport, and a hotel receipt. Room 614, Hotel Mistral. Last Friday. I had been in Milwaukee last Friday. A 3-day conference. I still had the name badge in my suitcase. I ran my fingers over the paper, smoothing the fold where he'd stuffed it in carelessly. His signature at the bottom. A timestamp. A charge for room service, 2 entrees. Wine. I locked the drawer and left the key inside. That night, I didn't make dinner. I didn't speak when he came home. He talked about traffic, the price of gas, some funny story from his colleague. I just nodded. He didn't notice. He kissed my forehead and went upstairs. I stood in the kitchen staring at the empty mug hook, the one that used to hold my favorite cup. There's a silence that comes after betrayal. Not the kind that's sad, the kind that sharpens everything. You notice the hum of the fridge, the way the light flickers in one corner of the ceiling, the tick of the clock. And you realize you're awake now. They didn't even use my name. At 9:14 a.m. on a Wednesday, I became an employee ID not recognized. That's the line that popped up when I tried to log in. I sat there blinking at the error message like maybe it would fix itself if I waited long enough. Like maybe someone would knock on my door with coffee and a sheepish laugh and say there'd been a system hiccup. But no one came. Instead, I got an alert on my phone, a calendar update. Access revoked. No subject line, no explanation. Just a gray bar where my weekly check-in with Dana used to be. I remember the second I knew it was intentional. It wasn't the message. It wasn't the silence. It was when I opened the folder I kept for exit protocols, the one I wrote myself ironically, and realized I couldn't even open my own documents. Everything was locked. 3 minutes later, a man named Kyle Eit, I think, showed up at my door with a company-issued envelope. He didn't sit down, just hovered there pretending to be casual. "Hey, Iris. I've been asked to escort you to the front desk." I stared at him. By who he looked down. I don't know. Just got a message from upstairs. HR, I asked, knowing full well there was no HR anymore. They'd quietly dissolved our department last quarter. Dana had absorbed it into her strategic operations group. "Yeah," he said, clearly lying. "I think so." I stood slowly, smoothed my skirt, slipped my bag onto my shoulder. I didn't grab anything else, not the family photo, not the desk plant I'd watered every Monday for 6 years, not the notes from the mentorship program I built from scratch. I just walked. No one looked at me, not really. A few eyes flicked up from screens, then flicked away just as fast, like if they made contact, they'd be next. I passed Dana's office. Her door was closed. Of course it was. The woman I trained, mentored, defended during her first botched presentation, the one who used to call me her work mom in front of the board, couldn't even look me in the face. Kyle stopped at the elevators. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded once. Then we walked the rest of the way in silence. At the front desk, they gave me a white envelope with my name typed in small black letters. No logo, no explanation. I didn't open it. I stepped outside and it was raining. Not a dramatic downpour, just a cold, steady drizzle that felt indifferent to everything. My umbrella was in Alan's car. Of course. I stood there for a while, feeling the water soak through my sleeves, my collar, my scalp. I didn't move. I didn't call anyone. Eventually, I walked to my car. Each step slow heavy. I opened the door, slid in, and sat staring through the windshield as the rain ran in streaks across the glass. The scarf was still in the passenger seat, folded neatly, tucked there like a gift. I picked it up again, held it close, inhaled. Eucalyptus, and underneath it something warm, like musk, like skin. Not mine. That's when the thought landed. The thing I'd been circling around for days but hadn't dared to say out loud. This wasn't random. It wasn't just personal betrayal. It was coordinated. He cheated. She demoted. Then she fired. One after the other, Neat, efficient, like something out of an HR guidebook if the goal was to erase someone cleanly. The question wasn't whether they did it. It was how long had they been planning it. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Sorry to hear about what happened. She's been gunning for your role for months. I'm disgusted. No name, just that. I stared at the screen, thought about replying. Didn't. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed one word, reclamation. I didn't know what it meant yet. Not exactly. But it felt like a start. I drove home without the radio on. Every light turned green before I had to stop. The streets were almost too quiet, like the world had decided to give me space. At home, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and dust. Alan wasn't there. I walked through the living room, through the kitchen. Everything was in its place, and none of it felt real. In the bedroom, the bed was perfectly made, the blinds drawn halfway. One of his jackets draped over the armchair, navy blue faint cologne still clinging to the sleeves. I sat on the edge of the bed, let my fingers sink into the comforter. Then I reached under the bed and pulled out the old fireproof box, the one we kept for documents. I clicked it open. Inside, marriage license, deed, car titles, and one thin folder labeled Callahan, joint, tucked inside that a printed email thread between Alan and someone named D. Warren. Dana. The subject line, restructure proposal. Timing. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't need to. Just the date was enough. 6 weeks ago, while we were at a marriage retreat in Arizona, while he told me he wanted to start fresh. I closed the box, put it back, and then I did something strange. I took the scarf from my purse, walked to the laundry room, and buried it in the bottom of the hamper. Then I stood in the hallway and stared at the mirror for what felt like hours. My face looked blank. Not sad, not angry, just quiet. There's a kind of silence that comes after you've been erased, after someone decides you're disposable. It's not the silence of defeat. It's the silence before something grows back. I didn't know who I was yet. Not fully. But I was starting to understand who they were. It started with the kitchen. I walked in the next morning and saw the cutting board on the counter still damp from rinsing. The half-full glass of water beside it, a spoon with yogurt crusted at the edges. Not mine. I always cleaned as I went. I looked around. Everything was familiar, our cast iron pan, the spice rack, the family calendar with crossed-out days. But it all felt staged, like a room designed for someone else's version of me. Alan came in while I was staring at the calendar. His tie was crooked, his hair still wet. He smiled like nothing had changed, like I hadn't been erased the day before. "Morning," he said casual. He grabbed the yogurt spoon, rinsed it with a few lazy splashes, and dropped it in the dishwasher. Big day ahead, I looked at him, blinking once. Then again. He wasn't even pretending to ask if I was okay. Not a single word about the job. Not even the performance of concern. I let the silence stretch between us. He didn't seem to notice. Thinking we should do something this weekend, he added, pouring coffee. Maybe get out of the city. Clear our heads. I stood still, watching the steam rise from his mug. My mug, the replacement one he'd grabbed from the back cabinet. I hadn't told him mine broke. I wonder if he noticed. Probably not. He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "This came for you yesterday," he said, handing it over. I didn't open it. The return label had no name, just a P.O. box from Michigan. I didn't open it either. Not yet. He kissed my cheek again. His lips were cold. "I'll call you later," he said already, halfway out the door. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. I waited 5 minutes before I opened the envelope. Inside, a prepaid burner phone, still in its plastic wrap. and a paperback copy of a book called Digital Dust, Tracing the Footprints People Think They Erased. No note, no signature, but I knew who it was from. Marissa. My sister doesn't call. She sends. The last time we'd spoken was 6 months ago. She said I was too good at swallowing things. That one day I'd choke on it. I guess she saw this coming. I sat at the kitchen table, the burner phone in one hand, the book in the other. My reflection in the dark microwave door looked unfamiliar, like someone paused in the middle of molting. I read the entire first chapter of the book in one sitting. Then I turned on my laptop. The company hadn't scrubbed everything. My cloud login still worked, probably a glitch. Or maybe no one thought I'd check. I wasn't in the mood for rage. I just scrolled, slowly, letting the familiar file names pass like gravestones. Then I found it, a chat thread titled Blue JQ3 Ops. It was a private Slack archive. I clicked on it. There they were, Dana, Jenna, 2 others from my old team. The first message was 2 months old. From Dana. She's getting too close to the expense reports. We need to move soon. Then Jenna. She still thinks she's safe? Wait till the conference week. Alan said she'll be out of town. Then don't forget to make it look performance-based. HR audit needs a clean cut. And finally, Dana again. She'll never see it coming. Sweetheart still thinks I respect her. That one hit like glass in the throat. I didn't cry. I just copied the whole thread. Every line, every timestamp. Screenshotted it, saved the images, compressed them into a folder labeled Quiet Retaliation. I didn't send it to anyone. Not yet. I wanted it to sit. I wanted it to breathe. I opened the burner phone, charged it, waited. After 20 minutes, it buzzed. One message. When you're ready, I know who to talk to. No rush. M. I held the phone for a long time, not ready to respond. Instead, I went into the living room and stared at the mirror above the fireplace. The one with the tiny crack at the bottom corner that we never fixed. I looked at myself in it, really looked. I didn't look like someone who just lost everything. I looked like someone who finally understood the rules. That afternoon, I took a walk. Past the bakery where Alan once proposed we start a family. Past the old library where I used to work weekends just to have a quiet place to think. I ended up in front of the building where I worked. The same glass doors, same security desk, same stupid motivational poster in the lobby that said, Team. Together, everyone achieves more. I almost laughed. I didn't go in. I just watched from across the street. From where I stood, I could see Dana's office window. Blinds wide open, her desk cluttered with papers and coffee cups. Her hair pulled back in that sleek ponytail she thought made her look powerful. She looked small from where I was. I went home before Alan returned. That night, I cooked dinner like nothing had changed. He told me a story about his boss. I nodded, smiled in the right places. Then, I asked a simple question. Have you heard from Dana lately? He froze for half a breath. Not long enough for most people to notice. But I did. Know why he said almost too casual? Just wondering, I said. She left a voicemail the other day. Sounded off. He didn't respond. After dinner, he went upstairs. I sat at the table spinning the empty mug in my hands. When I finally stood, I walked into the laundry room, opened the hamper, and took the scarf out again. I lit a match, watched the flame flicker for a second before going out. I didn't light another. Not yet. Some things need to burn, but only when the wind is right. It's strange what hurts you the most. Not the betrayal, not even the lies. For me, it was the laughter, not out loud, but digital, flattened through screens, compressed in pixels. 4 people I'd eaten lunch with, celebrated birthdays, cried with after layoffs, all gathered in a private Slack thread to strip me down. And there, nestled between Dana's smug tactics and Jenna's passive-aggressive emojis, was Alan's response. A single, laughing emoji. That's what I found the morning I woke up with the scent of eucalyptus still clinging to my pillowcase. The folder I labeled Quiet Retaliation had grown overnight. Not just the screenshots, now audio clips, metadata export logs from systems I'd helped build. My name was still embedded in most of the templates they were using. It was like watching people burn your house down using tools you'd handcrafted for them. And I just sat there copying everything. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was documenting. At 10:07 a.m., I got an email, personal not work, subject line, "Hey, just checking in." Sender Dana. No salutation, no body text. Just a smiley face. I stared at it. There was no doubt in my mind that it was intentional. The timing, the emptiness, the performative concern. It was a move meant to disarm me, a warning wrapped in pleasantries. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the only person who still felt like blood. "Hey," Marissa said. "No pleasantries, no catch-up." "You read the book, finished it." She didn't sound surprised. "Good. You ready to make a mess?" "Not yet, but close." There was a short silence. Then her voice softened. "I found someone. Her name's Priya. She's good. Former compliance investigator. Quiet, off the books." I nodded, forgetting she couldn't see me. "Send me her contact." "You sure I'm sure?" Marissa exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. "I'm proud of you, Iris." I didn't say anything. She didn't expect me to. After we hung up, I looked around the room. Everything felt suddenly artificial. The curated bookshelf Alan liked to show off during Zoom calls. The new floor lamp Dana had gifted us last Christmas. The painting in the hall that matched one from her office, I hadn't noticed that before. It was like little pieces of her had been grafted into my life without permission. I pulled out my old work laptop from the closet. It still booted up, still ran cold. A leftover from a different version of me. Using the book Marissa sent, I started scraping metadata. Dana hadn't just stolen my role, she'd copied my documentation structure. Whole policy templates, entire workflows I'd created down to the file names. That wasn't ambition, that was theft. I compiled a report, dry clean corporate. Just the facts, just the timestamps. Then I found something I hadn't been looking for. A discrepancy in the compliance logs. 3 contracts signed under Dana's digital credentials, all dated before her promotion. Technically impossible. She didn't have signing rights at the time. Forgery. Document tampering. Grounds for immediate investigation. I highlighted the rows, dropped them into the report, and titled it Unauthorized Auths, Q2. And still, I didn't send it. I needed something else first. That night, Alan came home late again. He smelled like peppercorn and red wine. And under it, faint. But there, eucalyptus. "Sorry, got held up," he said, loosening his tie. "You already eat?" I didn't answer. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a drink, and asked, "How's the job search going?" I turned to face him slow. "I haven't started." He paused with the glass halfway to his mouth. "Really thought you'd be bouncing back by now." Bounce, like I'd tripped. Like this was a stumble. I walked past him into the den and opened the drawer where we kept old receipts. I'd planted one there the night before. He followed me in. "What are you looking for?" I held up the receipt. "Hotel Mistral, room 614. He blinked. "You left this in your glove compartment," I said. "Next to the mints you don't eat." He tried to play it cool, a chuckle, a shrug. "Oh, that must have been from a client thing. I crashed there one night after drinks." "You stayed 2 nights. He didn't have a response. I dropped the receipt on the table. "You don't have to lie anymore, Alan." There was a flicker of something in his eyes, then not guilt. Not fear, relief. Like he'd been waiting for this. Like he was tired of hiding. "Iris," he started walking closer, This hasn't been working for a long time. I'm not here to talk about us. He tilted his head. Then what I'm here to tell you, you backed the wrong person. He blinked again, slower this time. What, you're disposable to her, I said quietly, just like I was. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I walked upstairs, packed an overnight bag. Not much, a few clothes, my charger, the burner phone. Before I left, I went back to the kitchen. Lit a eucalyptus-scented candle I'd found buried in a drawer. The flame flickered, once then caught. The whole house smelled like her now. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't need to. I hadn't spoken to Marissa in over a year when she called me out of nowhere. That was her way, distant but precise. She didn't believe in small talk. She believed in timing, and she was always exactly on time when I needed her the most. She didn't say hello. Just, don't burn it all yet. I was sitting in the rental car outside a grocery store off I-84. I hadn't eaten all day. I'd driven 4 hours east to clear my head and ended up in front of a Safeway, staring at people buying bread and paper towels, like nothing was broken. What does that mean? I asked her. It means don't make a mess just to feel something. You don't need catharsis right now. You need leverage. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat. She used my name to push through 3 contracts she wasn't authorized for. That's forgery. You send that to compliance today, Marissa said, and you get satisfaction for a week. Maybe 2. But she walks, and she learns from it. She scrubs better next time. She gets careful. You want a real ending? You wait. I didn't answer right away. She knew me too well. She knew I hated waiting. I mailed you a book, she said. Should be there by morning. Learn what they're afraid of. When I got back to the house, I still called it the house, even though I didn't know if I was ever walking into it for real. Again, I parked down the street, walked the last block under cover of dusk. The lights were on. His car was gone. I let myself in. The air smelled stale, not like eucalyptus anymore, just like absence. Upstairs, I packed a suitcase, this time with more than an overnight's worth. The good sweaters, the flash drive, the fireproof envelope with the paperwork he never asked about. I left the scarf behind, folded it, placed it neatly on his pillow like a gift. That night, I stayed with Marissa. She lived in a glass-walled condo on the 7th floor of a building that smelled like old money and disinfectant. She poured me a glass of wine I couldn't pronounce and watched me from the kitchen while I sat in silence. You always wait too long to hit back, she said. I like to be sure, I said. I like clean lines. Well, they've already made their move. You're not writing a poem, Iris. You're writing a sentence. She handed me a folder. Inside were photos. Dana and Alan. Not blurry surveillance, crystal clear. Public, smiling. One of them laughing with their foreheads almost touching outside a restaurant. Another on the steps of a hotel. Room 614 behind them. I didn't hire anyone, Marissa said before I could ask. My paralegal sister manages reservations at Mistral. She owed me a favor. I ran my finger across the glossy surface of the photo, not stopping at their faces. Alan was wearing the shirt I bought him for our anniversary. Do you want to hurt them? Marissa asked. No, I said. I want to end them. She didn't flinch. Then you'll need help. That's how Priya came in, former compliance auditor, freelance now. Quiet, untraceable. She met us the next morning in a bookstore cafe, sipping chamomile tea like a Sunday school teacher. She asked questions, not about my marriage, about the infrastructure, how the company handled whistleblower complaints, what safeguards existed for internal audits, who signed off on Dana's promotion. She listened more than she spoke, wrote with a real pen in a black notebook that looked older than I was. When I finished telling her everything, she closed the notebook softly. You don't want her to lose her job, Priya said. You want her to lose her future. I nodded. She smiled. I can work with that. Back at Marissa's, I took the book she'd mailed, Digital Dust, and read through the night. Page by page, highlighting every trick Dana had likely used. Every digital footprint she thought she'd erased. I opened my laptop around 2 a.m. and logged into a backup account I hadn't touched in years. One we'd used for a company wellness pilot, a folder Dana didn't know existed. Inside were archived training sessions, templates, performance review rubrics, the exact spreadsheet formulas she'd stolen and presented as her own. I copied them all. Saved every last file under a new name, Blueprint. Original author I, Callahan. When I finished, I opened the hallway drawer in Marissa's guest room. Inside was a candle, eucalyptus. She always had one on hand for headaches. I stared at it for a long time. Then I lit it, watched the flame twitch and settle. I closed the door, locked it, and went to bed. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The first message I sent wasn't to Alan, and it wasn't to Dana. It went to legal. Not from my main account, obviously. That had been shut down with a precision I hadn't realized Dana was capable of. But there was a back door, a small admin credential buried inside the onboarding archive. I'd created it years ago when we were still trying to streamline system access for new hires. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, but like most things in that office, it was overlooked once the budget shifted. So I used it. At 3:08 a.m., I drafted an email to our legal review board marked anonymous and attached a packet labeled Initial Ethics Concerns. No accusations. No dramatics, just clean documentation. Timestamps, irregularities, a promotion that coincided with contract tampering, a department restructure with no official HR documentation. Dana's name in places it shouldn't have been. I left Alan out of it. For now. The point wasn't to blow it up yet, just to tap the glass. Just enough to make someone in that gray-carpeted tower flinch. After I sent it, I deleted the admin credentials, erased the browser history, rebooted the device twice. Then I made tea, not coffee. I was trying to learn how to function without depending on things that kept me jittering. The burner phone buzzed around dawn. Unknown, number received. You'll hear movement in a week. No signature. Just that. I didn't respond. I just powered the phone down and slid it under the cushion of Marissa's guest room armchair. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere Alan wouldn't think to look if he ever got curious. He hadn't contacted me since I left. That was what told me I'd timed it right. When I looked in the mirror the next morning, I noticed something different. Not in my face. In my posture. There was a slight tilt forward, like I'd been leaning into things again without realizing it. I was no longer recoiling. That day, I wrote a second email. This one to someone named Miriam Chen, head of compliance. She didn't know me personally. She'd come in during a merger 2 years after I stopped attending interdepartmental reviews. I kept it simple, subject potential misuse of signature authority attachment unauthorized auths. Q2 message. This may have already come across your desk. If not, I believe it merits attention. Dates and permissions don't align. Still anonymous. Still no direct mention of Dana. Still silent on the affair. Let the data speak first. That was the lesson Marissa had drilled into me back when I thought justice was about clarity. It's not about being right, she told me. It's about making their silence impossible. I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I went for a walk. Past a bookstore, a shoe repair place, and a little florist with sunflowers in buckets. I bought one, just one. The florist wrapped it in brown paper with a piece of twine. I carried it home like a secret. I placed it in a vase on Marissa's windowsill and stared at it until the light shifted across the floor. Sometimes the smallest bright thing in a room can feel like an explosion. By the third day, I heard from Priya again. She'd found a payment, a transfer from an outside consultancy. But there's no invoice, no paper trail. Guess who approved it? I didn't have to. Dana, I said. And it went into a shell LLC that Alan's connected to, she said quietly. Barely hidden. Sloppy even. Did she know I don't think she cared? Priya said. She didn't think anyone was watching. I closed my eyes. That was the thing. I'd made myself invisible at work for so long, quietly competent, low drama, always dependable, that by the time they turned on me, they assumed I'd stay silent. They thought silence was weakness. They didn't know it could be a weapon. The next message I sent was to the press. Not a story, just a name, a tip. I used a private submission form for a business ethics reporter I'd followed for years. No attachments, no accusations. Just look into Dana Warren's conflict of interest disclosures. Promotions tied to contract anomalies. Someone at Callahan might want to talk soon. I added a burner email address I hadn't used yet, then closed the tab. The sun was setting by the time I returned to the living room. I opened the window. The air was crisp, fall leaning in. Somewhere below, a dog barked and someone laughed. The world was still turning, and I was moving with it now. That night, I wrote something down in a notebook Marissa kept by the phone. Just one line. There is a difference between quiet and erasure. Alan didn't know that yet. Dana never would. At 3:42 a.m., he thought I was asleep. He thought I'd stayed at Marissa's again. I usually did by then. But that night, I came home, quietly. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just sat at the far end of the hallway in the dark, still waiting. The master bedroom door was cracked open. The light from his phone cast a faint glow across the wall, flickering every few seconds as he scrolled. Then I heard him whisper, "Yeah, she's still out. No, she has no clue. She's not suspicious, I promise." His voice had that low, casual rasp he always used when lying. "Once it's settled, I'll talk to her. She won't make it ugly." I barely breathed. There was a pause, then softer, "You worry too much. It's already done." He hung up and turned over. A minute later, I heard his soft, shallow breath shift into sleep. I didn't move for a long time, just listened to him breathe. When I finally stood, I moved like I was underwater. Slow, deliberate. I walked into the guest room, the one we never used, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the old dresser mirror. My face was pale, but not shaken. I wasn't surprised anymore. That was the gift of betrayal. It took the mystery out of people. What was left was clarity. The next morning, while he was still sleeping, I went down to the garage. His car keys were on the hook right where they always were. I took them without hesitation. The car was cleaner than I expected. Alan was never meticulous, but this looked detailed, wiped, smelled like lemon wipes and new plastic. But under the passenger seat, in a fold between the floor mat and the base, I found it. A small envelope. Jewelry store logo. Inside a receipt. One platinum bracelet. Custom engraved. Not my initials. Not even close. The date, 4 days before I was fired. He must have bought it the day Dana pitched her department restructure. I held the paper for a long time, then folded it into quarters and slipped it into my coat pocket. I returned the keys to the hook and brewed coffee. Sat at the table like nothing had changed. He came down 20 minutes later, yawning already, halfway into his work voice. He kissed the top of my head and said, "You're up early. Couldn't sleep." He poured himself a cup and asked, "You staying at Marissa's again tonight?" I shook my head. "I think I'll be home." He smiled. Good. He didn't ask why. That evening, I went to see Priya again. She had something for me, a printout of financial routing tied to the consulting contract Dana had pushed through. The one with Alan's silent co-signature buried deep in the approval trail. She handed me a folder and said, "You ready to move?" "Almost," I said. "What's left?" "Just the goodbye." She didn't press. On the drive home, I opened the car window and let the wind take my hair. The air smelled like pine and distant rain, the kind of scent that makes you remember versions of yourself you thought were long gone. I parked in the driveway, but didn't go inside. Not right away. I sat in the car and thought about all the times I'd ignored signs, how many mornings I'd made his lunch, how often I'd defended Dana behind closed doors, how many meetings I'd chaired watching their glances pass between each other like wires I refused to see. It wasn't grief I felt anymore. It was focus. I walked in and heard him upstairs laughing on the phone again, this time louder, more careless. He wasn't whispering anymore. I went into the study, his study. I'd avoided it for weeks, but not tonight. The drawer was unlocked, inside the hotel keycard. Room 614, same one from the receipt I'd found in his car. Next to it, the box for the bracelet, empty. And one handwritten note on legal pad paper folded into thirds. "You don't ask questions anymore. No name, no signature." Just that. I held it in my hands like it might burn, but it didn't. I turned on the desk lamp and placed the receipt beside the box. Then I added a small post-it. Just one line, "It's already ugly." I left it there. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pack another bag or slam a door. I simply sat across from him at dinner. He scrolled his phone. I watched the flame of the eucalyptus candle flicker between us. He looked up once, smiled. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking." "What about the future?" He nodded and went back to his screen. I watched him finish his meal, watched the grease cling to his fork, watched his mouth move like I hadn't already watched him lie. And when he left to shower, I took the receipt back, folded it, slipped it into the envelope from the bracelet, and tucked it into my purse. Tomorrow, I would start moving money. But tonight, I wanted him to think I was still here. She looked smaller in person. It was a Thursday afternoon, just cold enough for jackets, but not gloves. The kind of weather that keeps your words crisp. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not even Marissa. Dana always went to the same cafe after staff meetings. Corner of Alder and 3rd, where she could be seen but not approached. It had become her unofficial power seat, same table, same oat milk latte, same too loud voice on speaker calls she pretended not to notice were public. I sat at a table 2 down from hers, watched her pick at a croissant like she didn't remember who she stole that seat from. She was on her phone talking to someone, maybe Jenna, maybe someone new. Her voice sharp, clipped. "I don't care what they found in the logs," she snapped. "If Chen wants to escalate, she'll have to prove it's not personal." Her fingers tapped the screen like a reflex, not seeing me. She wasn't looking for me. I wasn't someone she expected to return. When I stood and approached her table, her eyes flicked up. At first, she didn't register. Just another stranger. Then something shifted. Her face stiffened like a thread pulled tight inside her jaw. "Iris," she said, drawing out the name like a formality. "I heard you'd left town." I set the envelope down on her table. "I didn't leave," I said. "You erased me." She smiled, thin and professional. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." I sat. "You don't have to pretend. I know everything now. The contracts, the backdated authorizations, the Slack threads, the consulting payout into Allen's LLC." Her expression didn't change, but her hand stopped moving. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm informing you. There's a difference." She reached for the envelope like it might be booby-trapped, slid it open with 2 fingers. Inside were 2 things. 1. A printout of the Slack messages with every line she ever typed about me, every sweetheart, dripping with sarcasm, every laugh at my expense. 2. A copy of the financial route traced from the company's budget to Alan's dummy shell account. All labeled, all time-stamped. "This is illegal," she said, voice dropping. "No, Dana," I said, leaning forward. "What you did is illegal. What I did is documentation." She opened her mouth to protest again, but her words died in the back of her throat. Maybe she saw it then that I wasn't here to plead, that I hadn't come for revenge. I came to finish a story she thought she'd written alone. "I'm not coming back," I said. "I don't want your job. I don't want his name. I don't even want your apology." She swallowed, but said nothing. "I just want you to know I continued that when they call, and I'll be listed as the anonymous whistleblower on record. I've already signed the compliance statement. Everything is archived. I'm protected." "You're bluffing," she whispered. I shook my head. "I'm not." She reached for her phone. I stood. "You can call whoever you like, but you should probably stop saying my name in rooms where you don't control the door." Her face didn't move, but something in her eyes wavered. Just a flicker, like the first twitch of something collapsing. I walked out without looking back. The eucalyptus smell clung to her like it always did. This time, it didn't sting. It smelled like desperation, like the kind of cleanliness people spray over rot. That night, I sat by the lake behind Marissa's building. The water was dark, still. Leaves floated like quiet thoughts across the surface. I thought about what Dana might do next. Maybe try to discredit the evidence. Maybe lean on Alan to twist the story. But she was already bleeding through the seams. Priya had confirmed earlier that day compliance had launched a soft probe. They were digging quietly, interviewing former team members, cross-referencing dates. The tip had landed hard. The glass tower was wobbling. Alan hadn't texted me all week. No apologies. No questions. Just space. I think on some level he knew it was over, but he still hadn't figured out how much of it he'd already lost. I would get to him, but not yet. For now, it was Dana's turn to sweat. Back at Marissa's, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at her kitchen table. The folder Dana had opened was still in my bag, untouched, since I handed her the copy. I didn't need to reread it. I knew every word. I lit a candle, not eucalyptus. Vanilla and amber this time. Soft, warm, mine. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed sharp and fading. I didn't flinch. I wasn't afraid anymore. They asked me to come back. Not Dana. Not Alan. Not even the legal team I'd fed with quiet evidence. It was someone higher. Someone I'd never met in person, a vice president of something vague and untraceable in the corporate hierarchy. The email arrived on a Monday. Crisp. Polite. No apology. "Miss Callahan, we'd appreciate your perspective as we re-examine a number of departmental decisions made under Ms. Warren's tenure. Are you available for a short-term strategic consultation?" I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because the phrasing made it clear they were already folding her name into the past tense. Ms. Warren's tenure. I forwarded it to Marissa, then closed my laptop and walked to the window. Outside, it was raining again. Not a downpour. Just steady gray water softening the world. The kind of rain that doesn't demand attention. The kind you can disappear inside. I made tea, let it steep too long. Drank it anyway. I hadn't answered yet. I didn't need the job. Marissa had helped me shore up my accounts. Alan didn't know it, But our joint portfolio had already been drained slowly, carefully, with the kind of methodical planning he never thought I was capable of. I'd taken back what was mine before I ever left the house. I didn't need revenge either. Not anymore. But I did want something. Not restitution, not control, access. I wrote back that evening, said I'd be willing to come in on a temporary basis. Discreetly, no formal announcements, no titles, just strategy support. I knew they wouldn't argue. They were drowning. 3 days later, I walked through the glass doors again. The security guard blinked when he saw me. "Miss Callahan?" I nodded. "They're expecting me." He let me pass without a badge. The building smelled the same recycled air ink, the faint trace of that lemon cleaner they used in conference rooms. But something was different. There was tension in the way people walked, in how doors stayed open, longer eyes held just a second too long. Something had shifted. Dana's office was empty. The blinds were drawn, the lights off. Her nameplate gone. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. She was already gone in title, if not yet in paper. It was just a matter of timing now. A younger woman I didn't know led me to a corner room. Not the top floor, but close enough to see the river. She mumbled something about policy reviews and upcoming audits. I barely listened. My attention was on the keys. They gave me access to the company archive, the legal record management system, and all digital communication trails flagged under Dana's ID. No one said it aloud, but they were asking me to clean the wound without naming what caused it. I wasn't surprised. Corporate doesn't apologize. It retracts. The first thing I did was pull the old workflows Dana had overwritten. My templates, my documents, all still bearing her metadata. I restored one, didn't tell anyone, just replaced it. The next day, I sat in on a strategy session. People avoided eye contact. A few smiled too tightly. One manager, Nate, I think, leaned over and whispered, "It's good to have you back." I just nodded. Let them wonder why I wasn't smiling. Later that afternoon, I found myself outside the women's restroom staring at the mirror above the sink. For a second, I saw her reflection instead of mine. Dana smoothing her lipstick, checking her phone, fixing a strand of hair she always tucked behind her ear when she was about to lie. But it was just me. Different. Quieter. Sharper. That evening, I packed up my temporary office and took the elevator down. The ride was slow, one of those quiet ones where no one speaks. I watched the numbers count down. When the doors opened, I stepped into the lobby and froze. Alan. He was standing by the exit phone in hand, staring out at the parking lot like it held answers. He hadn't seen me yet. I could have turned, could have waited, but I didn't. I walked straight toward him. He looked up, startled. "Iris," he said. "I didn't know you were consulting," I said. "Just temporary." "Oh, that's great." He didn't know what to say. I watched him search for something warmth, humor, charm. None of it landed. "How have you been?" he asked finally. "Busy." He nodded. "You look good. I'm not yours to look at." His face twitched. That old Alan bravado crumbling under something he couldn't name. "I never meant for any of this to—" "You did," I said. "You meant it exactly as it happened. You just didn't expect it to have a cost." He was silent. I stepped past him, pushed open the door. Rain hit my face like punctuation. Before it closed behind me, I heard him say my name once more. Iris. But I didn't turn around. I didn't owe him the grace of my attention. Not anymore. It wasn't locked. That was the first thing I noticed. The drawer in his desk, the one I'd seen him guard like a dog over a bone, the one that always clicked when he shut it like some unspoken signal. It was half open when I walked in. Not wide enough to suggest carelessness. Just enough to tempt curiosity. I stood there in the quiet of the house. It was the first time I'd been back alone since I left, and everything felt still too still, like the air was holding its breath. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows. It had rained that morning, and the glass was streaked with the residue of something recently washed clean. I walked toward the drawer and opened it the rest of the way. The hotel keycard was still there. Room 614. And next to it, folded and yellowed with fingerprints, was the receipt. Same bracelet. Same initials that didn't belong to me. I picked it up, unfolded it, ran my fingers across the creases like I was reading Braille. Then I saw something else. A notebook, legal pad. His handwriting unmistakable, all slants and half-formed letters. I flipped through the first few pages. Most of it was work notes, numbers, acronyms. Until page 5. A line at the top, she's changing. Then she doesn't cry anymore. She's watching me when she thinks I don't see her. It's like sleeping next to a mirror that doesn't reflect. I closed the notebook and let it rest back in the drawer. So he knew. Not everything, not the files or the whistleblower complaints or the forensic audit he'd helped trigger by accident. But he knew I wasn't soft anymore. He'd felt the silence and mistook it for distance. It was focus. I left everything in place except the receipt. Slipped that into my purse, not as evidence, not even as leverage, just as reminder of what he chose. He came home late again. No explanation, no performance. I was already sitting at the dining table sipping water from the old glass tumbler I used to use when I was too tired for wine. He looked surprised to see me. "You're here. I had files to gather." He nodded like that made sense. "You want to talk?" I looked at him and I didn't hate him. That was the strange part. I saw his betrayal like a blueprint now. Clean lines, shoddy construction, a thing built to collapse under its own weight. "No," I said. He walked to the fridge, opened it, stared too long, closed it again. "I heard about Dana." I said nothing. "She's under investigation now?" he asked, like a bystander watching smoke rise from a house he used to live in. "Yes. Did you?" He stopped himself. I waited. He sat down across from me, folding his hands. "You always had a way of seeing people's blind spots. It's not hard when you stop pretending they're decent." He winced. "Just slightly." "I was weak," he said. "That's not an excuse. It's just the truth." "Dana didn't want weak," I said, voice even. "She wanted invisible. You gave her both." He didn't argue. For a moment, we sat in that fragile stillness, two people tangled in the aftermath of their own design. "I thought you'd scream," he said quietly. "When you found out." "I did," I said, "just not out loud." He stared at the table. I pushed the bracelet receipt toward him, watched his face flatten when he saw it. He didn't reach for it. "You thought I'd never find it?" I asked. "No," he said. "I just thought you'd never want proof. That's where you were wrong." Silence again. Thicker this time. Almost warm. He looked up at me, tired, older than he used to seem. "So what now? I'm moving out." He blinked. "It's your house, too." It was. "You're just leaving." "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming." He didn't ask what that meant. Before I left, I walked to the fireplace and took the photo of us down. The one from Tahoe. He had his arm around me in it. I looked happy not because of him, but because I still believed we were building something real. I didn't keep the photo. I just laid it flat on the table and turned it over. Then I walked out. I didn't pack. Not yet. I wanted the house to feel it first, the sudden absence, the weight of something once dependable going quiet. The eucalyptus candle he'd left on the mantel was burned halfway down. I lit it once more before I left. Not for nostalgia, just to let the scent sit with him when I was gone. I walked out with nothing but the mug. Not the one that broke. That one's long gone, shattered clean in my memory, a before and after line I don't need to revisit. This mug was my grandmother's. Thick porcelain, faded roses on the side. I used to drink cocoa from it when I was 6, sitting on her porch while she taught me how to listen to silence. Not the absence of sound, the kind that makes your ears ring, but the silence that follows truth. I took that and left everything else. The couch, the dishes, the framed maps he liked pretending meant something. The drawer of anniversary cards with the same recycled phrases. Even the scarf. I left that in the top dresser drawer tucked under a t-shirt he never wore. Let him find it when he wasn't expecting to. Let the smell hit him then. Let him wonder if it was always there. The day I moved out was ordinary. No confrontation. No grand speech. He wasn't even home. Marissa waited downstairs in her car. I carried 2 bags, 1 box, the mug wrapped in a scarf I did keep, one my sister gave me years ago. I didn't need much. Not anymore. The house looked smaller as I left, like it had shrunk without me. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. At the apartment near the lake, the one I signed for under my maiden name, the key clicked into place like it had been waiting. The space was small, clean, and undecorated, the kind of place where you have to build meaning slowly. I liked that. I unpacked in silence, set the mug on the shelf above the sink, hung my coat, stood in the middle of the empty living room, and listened to the quiet. There it was again. Not absence. Clarity. That night, I bought a eucalyptus candle. I didn't plan to. I just saw it at the register and picked it up. Some part of me wanted to test the scent, to know if it still had power. I lit it when I got home. Let it burn. The flame wavered once, then steadied, and the smell. Nothing. No memories, no sting. Just a clean, distant scent with no name attached to it anymore. I sat by the window, the lake reflecting the last smear of orange sky, and sipped tea from the rose print mug. I thought about all the things I used to fill my days with: performance reviews, productivity spreadsheets, marital compromise. Dana's endless need for proximity, Alan's hunger for praise. The way I used to measure my worth by how few waves I made. Now I wanted the waves. Let them crash. Let them shape the shoreline again. The next morning, I opened a new email account and sent one message. To my former intern, a quiet, nervous young man named Joel, who once told me he hoped to build ethical systems. I remembered that, because no one says that in HR. Not anymore. I sent him the restored policy templates, the old training manuals, the missing performance review matrix Dana had scrubbed from the archives. Just one sentence in the body. Use what still works. Make the rest better. No name, no signature. I logged off. I walked into town that afternoon, bought groceries, said hello to the barista at the cafe around the corner, bought a paperback from the used bookstore with a cracked spine and someone else's name scribbled on the inside cover. In the elevator back up to my place, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup. Hair tucked behind one ear. Tired, but not empty. It was the first time I looked like myself in months. That night, I turned my phone off. No Alan, no Priya, no inbox, just the quiet and the scent of a candle burning down into nothing. It hit him months later. I don't know the exact day, but I know the sound. It started with a voicemail. Iris, call me back, please. Then another, more frantic. There's a situation with the mortgage. Something's wrong with the joint account. Did you authorize? Just call me. I didn't. Then the text messages started. Polite at first, careful, the way someone speaks when they're hoping to rewind the tape. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. Not sure if you got my last message. Need to clear something up with the bank. Can we talk? It's urgent. I read every one of them and answered none. He didn't know yet that the house was slipping, that the equity line he'd used to help fund Dana's shell consultancy was now frozen, that the lien I'd quietly filed with the help of Marissa's contact had gone through, that without my name, his financial stability was just a story he'd told himself over dinner for years. He didn't know because he never paid attention. But when the foreclosure notice came, I imagined that silence got louder. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I'd just taken my part back. The part he assumed I wouldn't claim. The savings I built while he postured about strategic risk. The investment account in my name that his attorney had never noticed, probably because I made sure it stayed unremarkable on paper. Low yield, quiet, invisible, until it wasn't. By the time he noticed the accounts had been closed, the assets moved and the paperwork sealed behind legal silence. I went to the old neighborhood once just to see it. Not the house. That didn't matter. But the cafe down the street where I used to sit on Sunday mornings and reread emails before replying, where Alan once told me he thought I had a cool strength. I didn't know at the time that phrase meant you're convenient. I sat at the corner table, ordered black coffee, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. He walked in, same jacket, different face, older, shoulders rounded, eyes darting, like he was expecting something he couldn't name. He didn't see me. He was scanning the room for someone else. Maybe Dana, maybe a lawyer, maybe just a version of me that still picked up his dry cleaning and reminded him to hydrate. I watched him order, fumble with his wallet. His card was declined the first time. He laughed nervously, tried again. The machine beeped. He pulled out a different one. That one worked. When he turned to scan the room again, I was already gone. He never saw me, and I didn't need him to. He didn't know about the silent shares. That's what undid everything. Years ago, my father had left me partial ownership in a quiet little portfolio tied to a third-party investor group. One of the properties they'd invested in Callahan's commercial holdings, the very firm Dana had bullied her way into restructuring. It was a poetic kind of accident. The kind you don't see until your life folds back on itself. The shares weren't in my married name. Alan never knew, neither did Dana. But when the audit expanded and the investors started asking questions, one name kept popping up in the meeting logs: Callahan. They thought it was a coincidence. Until the woman they'd fired walked back into the room with clean records, a full report, and the original policy manual in hand. They didn't thank me. But they removed Dana quietly. Let her resign. Full benefits, no public announcement. The corporate version of exile. A soft erasure. Alan. He sent me one more message after that. You didn't have to do all this. No anger, just bewilderment. That was what stung him the most, that I'd moved on without noise, that I hadn't screamed, that I'd done it all without lifting my voice. I deleted the message. The only thing I kept was the bank notice. Just a line item payoff balance satisfied. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like subtraction, like removing mold from a house before rebuilding. It's been nearly a year. Sometimes it feels like a dream I walked out of and shut the door behind. Other times, I can still feel the carpet in that office under my shoes. Still smell that lemon cleaner in the air. Still hear the silence when they decided I didn't matter anymore. But I don't live there now. Not in memory. Not in reaction. I live in a small apartment by the lake. The windows creak when the wind changes. The heat clanks. The neighbors are loud in the best ways, laughing, arguing, calling after kids who've let the screen door slam again. I like the noise. I teach now. Conflict mediation, of all things. 3 nights a week at the local community college, I stand in front of a whiteboard and talk about listening, about language, about how power moves through a room. Most of my students are 20-something, still trying to understand the difference between tension and danger. They ask big questions. They care more than I expect them to. They think I'm wise. I don't tell them about Dana or Alan or the long hallway where my badge stopped working. I let them build their own language around fairness, around restoration. I only step in when they confuse silence with surrender. A girl named Harper asked me last week, "How do you know when to stop pushing?" I said, "When the air around you stops shrinking." She blinked, smiled like she understood. Maybe she did. I still think about Alan sometimes, not often, not with pain. Just flashes. A glass left on the counter. The way he'd always clear his throat before lying. His hands always cold in the morning. I don't miss him. I miss the illusion of being part of something lasting. But I don't need that anymore. I've built something else. The mug, the one I walked out with, sits on my kitchen shelf. I use it when I grade papers. There's a hairline crack down one side now. It doesn't leak. It just reminds me that something can be fractured and still hold warmth. The eucalyptus candle is unlit. I keep it tucked on a bookshelf, not because I need it, but because it doesn't scare me anymore. The smell means nothing now, just wax and oil and memory. Sometimes I see Dana's name in industry updates, always sideways mentions, former executive, consulted previously with, never leading, never lasting. She's become background noise. Alan moved in with someone new, Marissa told me in passing. I didn't ask for the details. I imagine he still fumbles when asked about what happened. Still tells some version where I was too distant, too strategic. Still doesn't understand what it means when a woman stops speaking. I don't raise my voice anymore. I don't need to. The quiet belongs to me now, and in it, I hear everything.